Hello, my name is Teresa Skelton and I'm a candidate for the Justice and Anti-Corruption Party. I'm also the secretary to the Hampshire Police Monitoring Group. Now I'm making a small documentary and it will be divided up into 3 parts. Part A is my response to Eastleigh News regarding Simon Hayes, the ex-Police and Crime Commissioner for Hampshire. Part B is about the Chief Constable of Hampshire, anatomy of a fit-up. And Part C will be describing the Hampshire Police and Crime Panel and all its associates. Here is Olivia Pinkney, virtue signalling to the world by tweet on January the 8th, 2021. I've always said we enhanced police are proactive in maintaining standards and being transparent. There's no place in my force or policing for those who do not live up to this standard. She's talking about the sacking of some officers for making unpleasant, politically incorrect comments among themselves about minorities. All very bad, of course, nobody disagrees. But there could be other types of misconduct at least equally bad. How far do Olivia and her force stand up to scrutiny on some of this? What about unlawful detention followed by trial and conviction on lies fabricated by police officers?
Let's look at the question of kidnapping. The current definition is that kidnapping is an attack on or infringement of personal liberty consisting of the taking or carrying away of one person by another by force or fraud without the consent of the person taken or carried away and without lawful excuse. It's plainly obvious that wrongful detention by police could certainly meet this definition in every respect. The forcible and clearly unlawful removal to custody of Teresa Skelton from the venue of a public meeting without caution or lawful arrest on the 22nd of January 2016 would seem to be right in line with this definition. Just a reminder that in the process, Teresa had been seized, assaulted and injured by a PCSO. Also, that none other than meeting attendee Mrs. Olivia Pinkney personally abetted this. Teresa registered her views on this when she arrived at Basingstoke Police Station, 20 miles from her home in Winchester.
Hello. Hiya, Sarge. I'm explaining.
Who are you people?
Teresa, come here, please.
No,
Teresa, come here.
I haven't been arrested. I've been kidnapped by you.
She was banged up in solitary confinement for 21 hours, during which custody officers tried to pull another of their favourite stunts. They tried to say that her allegation of being kidnapped meant that she was mad and had to be sectioned. This failed because she was attended by a team of doctors who found her fully compos mentis the next morning. On leaving custody, Teresa was charged with assaulting the PCSO who had in fact assaulted and injured her. The truth neatly stood on its head.
We're looking at 3 things here: lies, manipulation, withholding of evidence. This is PSI 16239 Benjamin Wilden, a gentleman who played a key role in all this. He saw me arrive in custody in the company of PC 3893 Nick Lark. He therefore knew that PC Lark was assisting officer to PC 24071 Barry Webber, who claimed falsely to have arrested me at 10:37 that morning. PSI Wilden was the case officer. His job was to get the evidence together and present it in an official form called the MG5. As can be seen, all evidence useful to the defence must be disclosed in this form. PSI Wilden has put his name to this. Well, honest Ben magically disappeared. Poor old PC Lark. the only officer who was with me the whole time, from just before my abduction to my arrival in custody. The smell of rotten cod gets worse where Ben claims that PC Weber's video can't be downloaded for unspecified technical reasons. What a shame, and how convenient. You stated the arrest and transport was recorded on PC 24071 Weber's body-worn video. In fact, practically the only conversation of any kind I ever had with PC Weber was a few words about the state of my iPod.
He doesn't mind though, wasn't he?
He didn't video very much, you know, it's a shame that there was someone important and then it went into some sort of law.
Okay.
Well, it seems all right now.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, these computers basically are preloaded just like that software. So if I...
Yeah, it just went into a lock type and it said I had no memory or...
Okay, let's have a look. Do you want to... Let's actually look at the settings.
After that, PC Weber wandered off and I never saw him again. My barrister, Mr. Matthew Farmer, 2KBW, established the unreliability of PC Weber as a witness. At point 26, seemingly pointless falsehood, PC Weber claims he assisted PS Hurst and PC Pugh in placing me in the cage of the van. Lark's BWV, fully available for the IO to view, shows that Weber was not there. All this and more would have been revealed if PC Lark's body-worn video in full had ever been released to me. So Ben was never going to do that, was he? In fact, the first 20 minutes of Lark's footage would have killed the case against me. That's why his name doesn't turn up here. Lark's name had been replaced in the witness list with PC 21271 Bakers. Here he is across the way from PC Lark's nose. In fact, he was the van driver and nothing else. Maybe Ben thought I wouldn't know the IDs of any officers. Wrong! The first thing I did when PC Weber and Lark turned up was take their names and numbers. This is PC Lark's statement. Benjamin Wilden was very disrespectful to the courts. It took 4 case management hearings to get this statement, withheld from me at my original trial in Aldershot Magistrates. On the 4th hearing, just before my appeal, my barrister, Matthew Farmer, said he was not going to leave the court in Winchester until it was placed in his hands. It says, during my attendance at this incident, my body-worn video camera was activated. I can produce the body-worn footage as my exhibit NJL/TS/01. As for this video, also ordered released, the police never gave me the crucial opening segment, only a bit of it, starting from the arrival of van driver Baker as I was being frog-marched out into the street. Contempt of court or what? Not that the court seemed to care. The trial and appeal went ahead anyway. Perhaps Ben and Co. knew they could get away with it from the beginning. The missing segment at the beginning would have shown myself in the foyer outside Ashburton Hall, Winchester, after being assaulted inside the meeting room by PCSO 13204 Lawrence Day. It would have shown I was entirely on my own, not looking well, drinking water, standing at this table. 2. PC Weber and myself conversing quietly, and PC Weber walking away after a few minutes without carrying out any arrest. 3. Mrs. Pinkney and PCSO Day were entirely absent at that stage. Most strikingly, the smirking PCSO Day would then have been shown galloping intimidatingly down a stairway towards me as I stood at the foot, waiting to be led out of the building. He had to be sharply ordered back several times by PC Lark. No signs of any painful leg injury there. Significantly, the segment of PC Lark's video ultimately obtained only starts after this point. Here he is, the poor man's John Wayne, without his gun, pretty much as he looked when we met. Obviously an officer on duty. Of course, Ben Wilden and the police didn't play fair on anything else in the way of disclosure. Here's page 1 of Olivia Pinkney's statement. Page 2 ends, there were 3 uniformed. And this is page 3. An incomplete statement. This is the witness statement of PCSO Lawrence Day. It says here, this is a photograph of my left leg. This is what I got. Not so much of a left leg, but a black rectangle. So I went back to Ben Wilden and I said I'd like a photograph of his left leg. As for PCSO Day's leg, which I was supposed to have kicked, all I got to show any injuries he might have had was this black leg. Whilst Ben and the boys and girls at Hampshire Police rigged the evidence, their collaborators at the Crown Prosecution Service, Senior Crown Prosecutor David Fosler and Co., rigged the charge. When I attended the first pre-hearing at the Magistrates' Court, I was disputing that there could have been any contractor policing. The PCSO had gone straight into an assault on me, before he even said one word to me. Afterwards, he refused to identify himself. Olivia Pinkney, who had accompanied him, also lied. She said, at this stage, he does not have to. And I said, who are you? And she said, a police officer. I said, then you know he has to identify himself to me. Mr. Fosler piped up and said, it's all right, Teresa, it's all right. We admit that he did not identify himself. So we're going to change the charge to assault by beating. I said, well, what's that then when it's at home? And he said he was a civilian there. No, he wasn't, Mr. Fosler. He was a PCSO in full uniform. I've never been able to find out what went on inside the CPS to reach this decision. My information requests have been refused. The CPS claimed in a letter dated the 13th of December 2016 and signed by Mr. M. Lewis, Victim Liaison Officer. During his review of the case, Mr. Fosler identified that when PCSO Day attempted to remove you and place his hands on you, it was clear that there was no arrest. This meant that the actions of the officer could not be seen to be taken as part of their duty. Taking this into account, the charge of assaulting a designated person was not appropriate, and therefore the charge was amended to assault by beating. Reducing the charge like this guaranteed there would be no jury trial. Injuries like this one to my arm, inflicted by PCSO Day, might not have played so well to a jury as to a judge. They couldn't afford an acquittal. Not least, her ladyship, the chief constable, could have come out of the whole business looking bad in public. The powers that be much prefer to do their dirty deeds in a dark corner, well out of sight. In Aldershot Magistrates Court, Judge Gillibrand wouldn't allow the photographs of my injuries because it was not fair on the PCSO. At the end of the trial, he was full of gushing praise for Mrs. Pinkney as a witness, which perhaps seemed a little over the top. He did show one small piece of real insight. Before finding me guilty, he spotted that the rather thuggish prosecution witness, Darren Zammit, was not reliable.
Teresa Skelton took her case to appeal at Winchester Crown Court. Presiding over the appeal was Winchester Recorder Keith Cutler. The atmosphere in Judge Cutler's court was at least as telling as anything that appeared in evidence or is recorded in the transcript. The judge heard 4 prosecution witnesses who, under cross-examination, all sounded, to observers, to be furtive. In the witness box, they had their original police statements against Teresa in front of them. Some of the same falsehoods had appeared in all of these, showing likely collusion. Where they differed, this seemed to be because the witnesses had failed to keep their lies straight. First on was Hampshire Chief Constable Olivia Pinkney, who claimed to have seen Teresa kick PCSO 13204 Lawrence Day in the leg. Amidst a lot of umming and ahhing, this lady exhibited the symptoms of selective amnesia. When claiming to have seen anything to Teresa's detriment, she seemed capable of total recall. Anything potentially advantageous to Teresa put to her under cross-examination, well, she suddenly lost her memory. In a 20-minute cross-examination, she used the phrase, "I don't recall," on 10 separate occasions. On 4 others, she said the same in different words. A brief, embarrassed silence followed her suddenly blurting out that she had made notes after the incident. So that was a new one. We'd never heard that before, but had not brought them to court with her. Every rookie cop, fresh out of police college, knows to do this. The Chief Constable of Hampshire evidently does not. All applications for these notes through information requests to the police have been rejected on specious grounds. They would seem to be just as phantom as the mysterious kick to the PCSO's leg. Speaking of which, last on the stand was none other than Lawrence Day himself. He'd been spotted in the corridor before going into the court to testify, looking ill with nervous stress, in the company of some sort of mentor, perhaps there to hold his hand. Once in the witness box, he held up the court 3 times to read his original statement. The 3rd time, he was wilting somewhat under the pressure of cross-examination over whether he had, as he had claimed, actually seen Teresa's arrest by P.C. Webber or only assumed it afterwards. At this point, Day held up the proceedings to study his statement for quite a pause. Judge Cutler's patience apparently snapped when the PCSO finally whimpered that this had helped him. He almost bellowed at Day, "That has helped you, has it?" But PCSO Day still slithered out of answering the question, and the judge allowed him to get away with it. PCSO Day admitted that there wasn't a mark on his leg, not the least scratch, cut or bruise after the alleged kick. This didn't sit very well with the testimony of his boss, whom he referred to with toe-curling slavishness throughout his testimony as Ma'am Pinkney, who claimed that she'd seen Teresa kick him violently. A final piece of silliness was his belated recollection of having brought Teresa a jug of water after she'd been dumped by him in a chair in the foyer of Ashburton Hall, something as illusory as Mrs. Pinkney's notes. This looked like a clumsy attempt on his part to play the same compassionate card as his boss when she had claimed to have spoken so caringly to Teresa before assisting PCSO Day in taking her gently from the meeting room, later exposed in Teresa's polygraph test as completely untrue. All 4 witnesses colluded in this falsehood, as they did in many others. Between the 2 police officers came the testimony of Darren Zammit and Karen Baker. These 2 facilities management staff members at the Hampshire County Council building in Winchester provided a couple of make-weight witnesses. These were the people who were used as a goon squad against Teresa inside Ashburton Hall, not their proper job, which is just to lay out the chairs and switch the lights on. The twosome seem to have been roped in to make statements corroborating the claims of the 2 police officers. The trouble is, they couldn't keep it together with their lies either, nor were their fairy tales consistent with Pinkney's and Day's. Between them, the 4 witnesses managed to place the alleged assault on PCSO Day in 3 different places, 3 different times, and in 3 different sets of circumstances.
This image of the meeting room at Ashburton Hall was made after the incident. The people shown had never played any part in it and were in no way involved in making this film.
But where they are standing is where Karen Baker claimed to have seen Teresa kicking out, her statement suggesting as a defensive reaction to Day's move against her. Pinkney, Day and Zammit placed the kick on the far side of the doors in the foyer after Teresa had been frog-marched out. You can just about see the chair into which she was placed opposite. The police officers had it happen in the foyer just outside the door as they guided Teresa from the meeting room. X marks the spot, and she, in some unspecified way, managed to slip from their grip, turn through 180 degrees, and land the toe of her Converse by chance precisely on an old knee injury Day said he had suffered as a boy. Darren Zammit placed it on the far side of the foyer, just about as far away as you could get from where his colleague Karen Baker suggested it happened. He said it took place as he and PCSO Day pushed Teresa into the chair on the right of this picture. He squirmed as if he was on the rack when challenged in cross-examination over whether he had actually seen this kick or merely, as he said in his police statement, heard it. Like Day, regarding Teresa's alleged arrest by P.C. Webber, he would not give a straight answer. Mr. Zammit looked relieved when Judge Cutler told him at the end of his cross-examination, "You can now escape, Mr. Zammit." Mrs. Pinkney and the PCSO weren't in much better agreement with each other. Mrs. Pinkney had it that Teresa kicked Day after breaking free of his grip, then walked to the chair. PCSO Day said he had hold of her the whole time until he forced her into the seat. This was closer to the truth, since Day did in fact have her in his grip throughout her ejection from the meeting room. But Judge Cutler seems to have cherry-picked Mrs. Pinkney's account, which airbrushed Day's brutality, Teresa's injuries, and any defence of self-defence on her part if he was going to take the line that she had actually kicked the PCSO. In the upshot, upholding the guilty verdict, the judge said simply that he preferred the testimony of the prosecution witnesses. I wonder why. A little out of line, perhaps, with the proof, beyond a reasonable doubt, which is supposed to be the standard in criminal cases. In a tweet, a professional interrogator recently stated the following: "If a witness constantly claims they cannot remember, be sure, be certain, and uses phrases like, 'as I understand it,' then it is reasonable to infer they're trying to hide, gloss over, or avoid something they would rather forget about and dodge dealing with." Whatever else he may be, Judge Cutler is nobody's fool. After a decades-long career on the bench, he is one of England's senior judges. Is it vaguely credible that he didn't know what he was listening to in Teresa's case? It is remarkable that so senior a figure was wheeled out to preside over an appeal against a public order conviction at the lowest end of the scale. Perhaps it shows how far they'll go to get you when the interests of establishment gophers, not to mention their sacred rear ends, might be at stake.
The following is a video I made in April 2020. Yesterday there were two articles online, one from the Daily Mail that said police chief says convicted sex offenders should undergo compulsory lie detector tests, and the most famous one of all is when a police officer in Lancaster, I think it was, told a member of the public that he was going to lie about him in court to get him convicted, and this was in the Daily Express. Mrs. Olivia Pinkney, Chief Constable of Hampshire, alleged in sworn court testimony that she saw me kick a PCSO violently in the leg. This was at a public meeting of the Hampshire Police and Crime Panel in Ashburton Hall, Winchester, in January 2016. Hampshire Police and Crime Commissioner Simon Hayes was particularly against my presence. I wished to pose questions embarrassing to him. In fact, the PCSO violently ejected me from the meeting. Mrs. Pinkney's allegation, for which I was prosecuted and convicted on her evidence, was entirely false. A few weeks after this event, Mrs. Pinkney was given the job of Hampshire Chief Constable with Mr. Hayes' enthusiastic backing. Well, in a situation like this, my husband treated me to a polygraph test.
My name is Terry Mullins. I'm a polygraph examiner. Today is the 11th of May 2017. The person taking the test is Teresa Skelton. Teresa, keep very still. Your test has started.
The examination lasts for about 20 minutes. It's repeated 3 times with the 3 relevant questions, and then interspersed with neutral and comparison questions. Question 1. On the 22nd of January 2016, did you kick PCSO Lawrence Day in Hampshire County Council building? Question 2. Did any of the persons in question speak to you prior to PCSO Lawrence Day physically assaulting you in the County Council building? On the 22nd of January 2016, were you given a police caution before reaching the custody suite at Basingstoke Police Station? I answered no to all of the questions. Mr. Mullins made a report, and this was his conclusion. After careful analysis of all the charts to the test, Teresa Skelton's answers to all the relevant questions as listed above did not contain responses that are associated with deception. Therefore, it is my professional opinion that Teresa Skelton was truthful to the relevant questions on this test, and the result is classed as no deception indicated.
I'll mix us up. Public order. Score up to a police officer. Should I do that? Who are they going to believe, me or you? Who are they going to believe, me or you?
Well, that's a true word. In court, Recorder of Winchester, Judge Keith Cutler, swallowed the lot. PCSO Day had to admit he was left without a mark on him from any kick. But, without giving a reason, Judge Cutler simply said he preferred the prosecution evidence. This may have been especially the case because it was also the Chief Constable who was making it up. In these times when the powers of the police are being massively increased, is Mrs. Pinkney really the sort of person we want in the office of Chief Constable?